hello friends. Nayaswami Hriman here, talking to you from the Camino Hermitage on Camino Island, Washington, for today's broadcast of the unpublished writings of Paramhansa Yogananda. I'm going to continue in the vein of taking extracts from the articles Yoganandaji wrote entitled The Second Coming of Christ, and today's selection is from February 1933, and it's called The Temptation of Christ. I chose this because it's a curious article in that it's a very seemingly psychological interpretation of the temptation of Jesus, a psychological interpretation which I think during his lifetime was actually rather popular, because what was going on in Christianity, churchianity, during the first half of the 20th century, in the face and against the teeth of the scientific materialism of Western culture, especially in those days, was a denial of esoteric realities such as Satan. I'm not saying Yogananda succumbed to that interpretation, but he gives here a psychological interpretation, even though he himself testified that I add my testimony to those of others that Satan does exist, that the satanic force known in Sanskrit as Maya is a conscious force. He wasn't saying that Satan had two legs and a tail and wore a red suit, of course, but that it is a conscious force that attempts to influence the consciousness of mostly humans, let's face it. And so I thought you might find this interpretation interesting. So he starts, as he always does in these articles, with a quotation from the different parts of the Bible. Sometimes the same story occurs in 2 or 3, even 4 different of the Gospels. And so sometimes Yogananda would pull different and put them together. And so the devil took Jesus up into the holy city and set him on a pinnacle of the temple and said to him, "If you're the Son of God, cast yourself down from this pinnacle, for it is written, He, God, shall give his angels charge over thee," meaning the Son of God, "to keep thee, and in their hands they shall bear him up, lest at any time you dash your foot against a stone." And Jesus said, as we know, "Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God." Next, the temple took him up on a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them in a moment of time. In other words, intuitively. And the devil, meaning he didn't actually fly onto a mountain, and the devil said to him, "All this power I will give you in the glory of it, because it's delivered unto me to have the power to do so. And if you shall fall down and worship me, all shall be yours." Once again, Jesus said, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And then the devil had ended all the temptations. He left him for a season. Not sure what that means. And behold, angels came and ministered to him. So he took those from Luke and Matthew. There are 2 meanings to the above passage. The cosmic intelligence force, which turned away from God, meaning the satanic force, Maya, threw its searchlight of consciousness upon matter, this is in the beginning, if you will, to extol it, to make it look tempting, to tempt man with its tinsel glory. Any man who turns his consciousness upon matter automatically finds his vision matter-bound, along with Satan's vision. To be a slave of the senses is to use the soul's searchlight of attention for worshiping the glory of changing, temporary, pleasure-yielding matter. And to reverse the searchlight of attention of the soul is to behold the changeless, everlasting joy of the soul. So the first meaning is that the psychological Satan of ignorance took hold of the mind of Jesus while he was at the very height on the temple of meditation, situated in the holy city of his universal Christ consciousness. So you see, Yogananda is interpreting, it's not that Satan took him to the temple in Jerusalem and sat him on a high part of the temple, but meaning Jesus had attained a high state of consciousness in his meditation. You see, he would fasted and was out in the desert, wasn't he, for 40 days. But yet, Yogananda writes, was still subject to the temptation of ignorant delusion. This is interesting because elsewhere Yogananda taught that Jesus had achieved liberation of his soul from delusion in a prior lifetime. So he goes on, his past delusive habit of yielding to temptation was making a last effort to dislodge the divine habit of right thinking and to claim him. Now, Buddha, before achieving enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, also was tempted by Maya, as we know from this story. And yet Buddha was an avatar. So what these stories mean is not so much that they hadn't overcome delusion in past lives. It partly means, I believe, that the avatar, on taking human form, is tempted. In other words, and is showing us that in human form we are tempted by the attractiveness of matter and of the senses. So it's not that he's really saying that Jesus had not been liberated, but it's part and parcel of being in human form to be so tempted. And being a soul rather than a puppet of God means simply that in the consciousness of the soul of Jesus, through its evolution through time, there is embedded the memory of delusion. Now, he doesn't say all that, so you have to kind of know the whole body or a larger context of Yogananda's teachings. But it's interesting how he wrote this article, and that's really why I'm sharing it with you. Since I have he's reimagining Jesus's words or thoughts. Since I have regained my lost high state of divine sonhood by deep meditation, it is safe for me to cast myself down into temptation, because God will protect me through my guardian angels of spiritual conviction, intuitive experiences, and meditation-born wisdom. Even if I fall into temptation, the angels of spiritual thoughts will again lift me to my high state of consciousness and will prevent my strong foot representing willpower, from dashing against the stone of misery-making spiritual error. Now, he's not saying Jesus actually had these thoughts, but, I think all of the great saints and avatars go through spiritual experiences which they testify in order to show us what's up for us. In other words, even as we grow spiritually, we too will be tempted by these memories. And thus it is that the path to enlightenment isn't a straight line, it's like this. And so we're being warned about what to expect. Okay, now let's see. Again, psychological temptation followed Jesus to his very high mountain-like state of self-realization, and in quick mental vision showed him all the power and temporary glory that material possessions and dominion could give him, and lured him with the thought, I will give you all this power and wealth. Further, his psychological delusive habit made him feel that it had complete power over all temporarily glorified material things, and that it had the power to give him enjoyment of all material objects if only he would fall from his high state of self-control momentarily. A superman, even though he is fixed in a high state by deep meditation, is still, listen to this, is still subject to the temptations of his past prenatal and postnatal memories of sense enjoyments, which promise all kinds of quickly and easily obtainable pleasures in place of the hard-earned, lasting joy of self-control. Yogananda goes on to say the sense of taste, as an example, was given not to create greed and indigestion by overeating, but to joyously select the right food to help build the temple of God. To eat for the pleasure of taste produces greed, slavery, indigestion, and ultimately death. To eat for the maintenance of one's body, however, produces self-control, long life, health, and happiness. When the psychological delusive habit had finished tempting Jesus unsuccessfully with these memories, the delusion of mortal habit departed, for a time at least. Notice that, for a time at least, giving rise to the feeling of victory. The departing of Satan for a season signifies the transcendental state of fixed self-control, when the devotee rises above the state of struggle with evil. And as soon as the delusive habit disappeared, the angels of intuition, calmness, omniscience, and self-realization appeared in the consciousness of Jesus to serve him with lasting joy and happiness. So in many ways, this article serves as a warning to devotees. I remember in the early days of taking a week's seclusion, I would come back from it feeling victorious and on top of the world, literally, like, I don't want to say like Jesus, that would give you the wrong impression, and then immediately it seemed habits would assail me as soon as I got back home. Habits of temptation to irritability and even anger and a sense of, not omniscience and power. That didn't last long because I saw immediately what had happened. But this is the warning that Yogananda is giving using the example of Jesus' temptation. Again, he's not saying that Jesus had karma to overcome. This is the subtlety. It's just that, that's what comes with the turf of having a human body. And so, holding forth with wisdom, self-control, willpower to know what is right, to dismiss the satanic invitation to tempt and think that you are now strong enough to overcome it. I remember a man who was in the Raja Yoga course many years ago, and he was feeling high with all his great meditations and the wisdom of the course. And he said, I'm going back out to the streets to serve the people on the streets. We never saw him again. I think he was simply tempted by the restlessness and the ego affirmation that his being a savior to other people brought to him in the heights of his upliftment. But it was a temptation. And I suspect it didn't go